Hi everybody, it's John back again with another model inbox review. I'll give you 10 seconds to work out what this particular aircraft is because it's not a usual run-of-the-mill, highly produced aircraft from World War II like a Hurricane or a Spitfire. The aircraft was actually utilised by 4 different air forces during World War II. They were utilised heavily by the Royal Australian Air Force and the Royal Air Force in the Far East. I think these are Royal Air Force versions of them. And also the United States services, they also used this aircraft too in the Pacific Theatre. And the French Army de l'Air, they used the aircraft as well after World War II as a dive bomber. The aircraft, of course, is a Vultee Vengeance Mark II. And the kit we're doing an inbox review on, although it is based on the Frog kit, it's not a Frog kit. It's actually a Donetsk Toy Institute Vultee Vengeance Mark II, and we'll get to those in a minute. But that's a nice image there of an RAF squadron of Vengeances somewhere, I would have thought, in the Far East. Anyway, the kit originated in 1970 as a Frog release. This was the original Frog release kits and red labelled boxes, and the image is of a Royal Australian Air Force A31 Vengeance Mark II attacking a bridge somewhere in the Far East, which is quite nice. I like the look of the. Frog did some nice artwork on their kits, and the kits themselves have stood the test of time quite well, and the Vultee Vengeance is certainly one of them. Then in 1971, a year later, Hasegawa had a partnership with Frog, and they produced the Vultee Vengeance Mark II as a Hasegawa Frog kit, which is quite interesting. The kit is exactly the same as the original Frog kit, it's just in a Hasegawa box. So that's 1971, and then of course in the same year, Frog re-released and rehashed their boxes from red boxes to blue label boxes, and that's how you can tell a 70 to 1972 release. Sorry, this is 72. This is a year after the Hasegawa release was released. Then it's interesting when we get into the parts on this kit. We'll have a look at them, and they are actually quite good. I quite like the look of this kit as well. 1974, Frog went into their last iteration of the Vengeance Mark II, the A31 dive bomber, and this is the last style boxing that Frog offered their kits in, 1974 there. And then you went into the Novo offerings. This was the Russian company that bought up an awful lot of Frog's moulds and sold them as Novo kits. And they were sold all over Europe, probably all over the world eventually. But the kits were exactly the same. The only issue I ever found with Novo kits is that their transfers were absolutely hopeless. The decals just fell to bits as soon as you put them in water. But that's the 78 release from Novo. And then in 1980, you have the kit that I'm doing an inbox review of. This is a company called Donetsk Toy Factory or Donetsk Toy Institute, and they released the Frog kit in 1980 of the Vultee Vengeance A31 Mark II. And the boxes are they're probably the worst version of a box that you could possibly imagine because they wrap around the plastic a bit like a sausage roll, and you'll see exactly what I mean when we go into the boxings. But this is the first release. This was the light blue release of the kit, and then in 1987 they released the green version of the boxing of this kit, exactly the same, but 1987. And then in 1992 they released the midnight blue offering of this kit, and I think this is the only version of the kit by Donetsk Toy Factory that has white plastic. All the others, I think, utilises the same colour of plastic that's inside my box, which I think is very, very dark brown. Sorry, it's very dark brown. So that's the 1992 offering from Donetsk Toy Institute. Then in 1995, SMER got on the scene with the Frog kit as well, and they released this kit, which is interesting because the Vultee A31 Vengeance is the same aeroplane as the V-72, but the V-72 I think is the French Army de l'Air version of this aircraft, which of course SMER released. I'm pretty sure it's got French Army de l'Air markings in the kit. Royal Australian Air Force markings there on the front cover. Again, it's totally different artwork, and I quite like this artwork as well. Shows the Vengeance in all its glory, doesn't it? Not a pretty aeroplane, but it was certainly robust. 1995 went through to 1996, and Revell, yes, Revell, another release of somebody else's kit. They produced the Vultee Vengeance Mark II in their blue boxing series in 1996. Then in 1997, a company called Model Hobby, or Model E Hobby. I think it's Model Hobby actually. And I've got a feeling these are from Italy. They look like VAC4 models, but they're actually not. They're based, whoops, sorry about that. They're based on the Frog kit. I've just knocked my camera. Sorry about that. They're based on the Frog kit, and all the plastic inside the Frog, they're all Frog plastic, but it's got a different type of decal sheet here for the United States Air Force markings colours and the Royal Australian Air Force markings colours, which is quite nice. Then in 2004, a company called Cometic got on the scene, and they released the Frog kit of the A31 Vultee Vengeance Mark II. And this kit you can usually get pretty easily on the second-hand market. It's quite prolific, although you can't buy it in the shops anymore because I think Cometic have gone. 2004, gone to 2004 as well, and this company, this is called Plastique. They produce the Vultee A31 Vengeance as well. It's still the same kit, the Frog kit, but this one is in American markings. That's quite nice, isn't it? And 2004 went through to 2010, and Eastern Express released the Frog version of the kit in RAF markings. I like the artwork on this kit, and it was followed through for a number of iterations. Quite robust looking artwork on the kit. I like that a lot. 2010 went through to 2011, and ARC Models, they released the Frog kit of the Vultee Vengeance again. I think you can get this quite easily in the shops. I think ARC are still going today. 2011 goes on to 2018, and this is the last iteration of the Frog Vultee Vengeance with ARC Models. The interesting thing about the ARC Models kit is they don't hide the fact that it's a Frog model or a Novo model on the front of the box, and they're calling it Frog Novo. Well, it isn't a Novo kit at all. It's actually a Frog kit. But there you go, that's ARC Models. You can buy these online direct from ARC Models or from most hobby shops, and this is the most easily obtainable version of the Vultee Vengeance you can get nowadays, and you'll probably find it in your model shop, no problem whatsoever. Right, got a nice image here of a US Air Force Vultee Vengeance. The aircraft was, of course, an American aircraft, but it was utilised by the Allied Air Forces of Australia and Britain through Lend-Lease. They were sold quite prolifically through Lend-Lease, and they served an awful lot and very heavily in the Far East. Just pan the camera down very quickly, show you this very, very nicely packaged kit. I'm sure you'll enjoy this a lot. The kit we're looking at today is the Donetsk Toy Institute, and this was the first release of the kit with the light blue packaging. And the thing that's interesting about their packaging, as you can see from the side here, is that if you really wanted it to, it could just fall apart. You've got on the back here, made in Russia, model number 199. And on the back, on this edge, you've got very little, it's just Russian information. The box is designed to open up at one end, but if you get hold of one of these boxings, don't be surprised if the box falls to pieces when you're taking stuff out of it, because as you can see inside the box, it's like a sausage roll. It just, you know, rolls up and forms your box, and then presto, away you go. We'll put the plastic on there for now, and we'll have a look at the instruction leaflet, and this is a bit of a joke, I'll be honest with you. We'll have a look at the decals in a minute as well, because they're a bit of a joke too. What's interesting about the instruction leaflet is that you've got a Frog set of diagrams there. These are directly off the Frog kit, so they've passed over the Frog information very, very easily. But you know, it's just gone straight onto the instruction leaflet. But it's a very small sheet. Even Frog produce larger instruction leaflets than these. Yeah, very small sheet indeed. The kit builds up in 7 stages, and there's something unusual about the Donetsk Toy Institute or Toy Factory kits that I think you'll be surprised about. In section 1 you're building the interior. It's very simple interior. Section 2 you've got the engine, propeller assembly. In section 3 you're building the sub-assembly for the undercarriage. In section 4 you're putting the main wings together. And then in section 5 you're putting the fuselage and the engine and interior together. Quite easy, isn't it? General Frog instructions, you see. They carry straight over from the Frog kit. Then in section 6 you're putting the airframe together and the cockpit canopy with the aerial. And in section 7 you're putting the undercarriage assembly into place. Not really an issue, not a problem at all. I think this kit has a separate part for having the tail wheel raised, which is quite nice, isn't it? Yeah, and everything else is Russian. But the interesting thing is there's no paint or decal application guide. You've got no idea what paints to use on this kit. You have to go off the artwork, and the artwork, well, we'll see that in a minute. The decals, I think they're a bit, I think I can probably use them. They'll probably go on all right eventually, provided they don't fall to bits in the paperwork, in the water rather. But they are quite soiled, I'll be honest with you, and the decals do look pretty dire. So I might have to aftermarket source those, I'm not sure. And just to show that there is definitely no paint guide on this kit, no paint or decal application guide at all. And the paint, I mean, what colour would you paint your kit from that image? No idea. Nothing on the back. No paint guide or colour guide on the kit whatsoever. So there you go. That's interesting, isn't it? I'll just put the decals back into the instruction leaflet, because although I might not be able to use them, I wouldn't want to lose them if I can. And we'll get the parts out. There's not an awful lot to go through the parts here, and I don't need to get all 4 of these bits out, but I do need to get that out. We'll have a look at that in a minute. And we do need to get one of each of these out. I don't need to show you both the wings, I'll just show you one of each half. Cockpit canopy. People say this denotes the quality of a kit. I don't know how true that is, but if this would denote the quality of the kit, it's just barely average, isn't it? It's quite a thick piece of canopy. There's a bit of flash right on the back there. Can you see? That's going to need cleaning up. It's pretty thick. Nicely framed though. You can't see my fingerprints through there, but you know, I think you're going to see some of the detail of the interior, which is okay, isn't it? We'll just get the wings out of the way, because these are the loose parts of the wings. Interestingly enough, it's 1/2 of a wing that I've got out in total. Yeah. The wings parts themselves are pretty robust. They're quite typical frog parts, to be honest with you. Oops. They're pretty typical frog parts. The detail on them is heavily raised. There's some dive breaks in there. You can see them there. They're quite, I mean, they are embossed, but they're not greatly detailed, are they? So that's the upper wing, and that's the lower wing. Again, you've got a dive break there. See that? Aperture for the undercarriage. Very heavily raised panel lines. There's a navigation light on the end of there, but it's just solid plastic. So you'll either have to drill that out and put some clear plastic in there, or paint it silver or something, I'm not sure. Undercarriage parts here, these are pretty heavy set as well, but they are typical frog. I also like the fact that they've printed on the sprue F199 and made in Russia. That probably would have originally have had made in England written on it. Never mind. Pilots, typical frog pilots, nothing to write home about, but they're not bad. Yeah, quite detailed, they're not bad. The second smallish sprue, you've got a quite nicely cast propeller there, that's quite nice. It's not bad, is it? Let's get this box out of the way, because it's making focusing on these parts a little bit difficult. There we go. And then you've got the engine cowling and the engine itself. The engine itself is a lot smaller than the cowling, isn't it? Other bits and bobs. There's the interior floor pan. That's quite comprehensively detailed. It's not too bad at all. And the propeller retainer there. That's quite, yeah, they're not bad. Not bad at all, really. Whoops. One of the larger sprues. Tail plane. That's quite heavily. It's quite heavily cast. Not very detailed. The actual fuselage half is typical frog, isn't it? Not particularly detailed. It's quite heavily raised, panel lined. Don't know what's going on here. There's some sort of detail on the tail fin. Not quite sure what it is. I'll have to have a look on photos of the real aircraft and see. The wheels, they're pretty nondescript, aren't they? Yeah, not much going on there. And that's the rear gun. Yeah, that's the tail wheel door. If you want to use that in the closed position, there's not a huge amount there. And this sprue just shows basically the only differences in the parts of the tail wheel. That's quite nicely cast, really. It's all right. Joysticks, other bits and bobs there. Yep, undercarriage parts. So the parts are pretty much run of the mill. I'll be honest with you. I wouldn't write home to your granny and say you've got a really fantastic kit, because it's a typical 70s frog kit. Although they have sort of stood the test of time over the years, frog models, and you know, the moulds seem to have done quite well as well, a bit like Matchbox in many ways. Matchbox seem to have stood the test of time as well, and a lot of their moulds are still going now. Anyway, we'll just pack all this away, because I don't want to lose anything there. And then I can put this back into the box. Put these two wing parts in here. Fold that over. Put this back into here. Usually have an issue getting the parts back in the box, because there's a little flap inside the box that sometimes wants to open the box up from the side, but it seems to have gone together. That's all right. There we go. There's your image of the box. Let's have a look at the gumph and get through this as quickly as possible to close the video. The model we're doing an in-box review on today is the Donetsk Toy Institute Vultee Vengeance Mark II. Its serial number is model number 199. It's moulded in 1/72nd scale, and the release date from the frog kit was originally 1970. But the Donetsk Toy Institute, I think, was released in 1981, maybe 82. The decals are for two versions: a Vultee Vengeance Mark II from 84 Squadron Royal Air Force, based at Maharappa in 1944, and the second is of a Vultee A27 Vengeance Mark II of 24 Squadron Royal Australian Air Force 10 Group, based at New Guinea in 1944. The dimensions of the kit are 6.5 inches long by 5 inches span by about 3 inches high on its undercarriage. There are 35 parts on 4 brown plastic sprues and 4 loose brown plastic parts and a clear loose plastic part as well, totaling 40 parts in total. Options and costs. These are interesting. I have included all of the options because the options are quite interesting. In 144 scale, there's a company called Miniwing, and they produce a Vultee Vengeance Mark II and an A35 Vengeance in two separate boxings. So the A35, I believe, is the French Air Force one, the French Army de l'Air aircraft. And these models retail for about £19 to £20, but to be honest with you, the Miniwing kits, they're not bad. They look pretty good. I've seen images of them made up and they're pretty good. Peter's Planes also do a Vultee Vengeance, and that one isn't so good. No pricing is available on that. In 72nd scale, Frog obviously did the Vultee Vengeance Mark II. These kits retail for anything from £10 to £30, and Special Hobby do a very nice release of the Vultee Vengeance Mark I and Mark II. That kit retails for £15 to £32. Now the following kits are all reboxed Frog models. The Arc models Vultee Vengeance is £6 to £12. Cometic's option is £15 to £20. Donetsk Toy Institute is between £14 and £20. Eastern Express is between £6 and £10. Hasegawa Frog is about £10 to £20. Model Hobby, no pricing is available on that, but I'm guessing it's probably about £15 to £20. Novo's release is £7 to £10. SMER's release is £10 to £12. Revell's release is £7 to £12. And ZTS Plastique is £10 to £14. Now in 48 scale, AZ model do a Vultee Vengeance Mark II in RAF, United States Army Air Force and Army de l'Air Services boxings, and they retail for anything from £40 to £65. And MGD models do a Vultee Vengeance Mark II in Army de l'Air Service boxings, and that kit is a reboxed AZ model kit, and that retails for £70 to £75. Don't ask me why it's more money. I don't know, maybe the decals are better. In 128 scale, A company called Replikit have actually reboxed a 1940s release of the old Comet kit, which I think was originally made in wood. And they've released the Vultee Vengeance Mark II in 2008. And I think you can still get examples of this kit around now, and that kit retails for about £15. But don't be surprised if it retails for about £20 to £50. Conclusions. Another frog kit that stood the test of time. It will be no surprise that it's dated to hell, but it looks okay. Okay enough for Revell to rebox it in 1996, amongst others more recently, and the parts are flash free too. I think the Donetsk Toy Institute kit is a builder's kit and not for the collectors, as the boxes would be a nightmare in a stash. And I think Donetsk Toys should have included a colour and markings guide that is appalling. Thank God for the internet. The kit is in a 2-horse race with the 72nd scale cup, with a kit that will beat it every day of the week. But for the money, it's not a bad budget model to opt for. So that's the inbox release, the inbox review done of this release originally from Frog, but this is the Donetsk Toy Factory. The jury's going to be out on this. I think it'll build up pretty good. I have seen a few of these models built up, obviously not this particular option. They were all frog kits that I've seen built up, and I'm guessing it should be all right. It should go together okay. So anyway, if you've got any queries, questions, anything, just put them in the comments box. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And I hope all of your modding projects are going well. I hope you're staying safe in the lockdown that's going on at the moment with the COVID-19 absolute nightmare across the world, isn't it? Anyway, thanks for tuning in, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible with the next one. Thanks for now. Bye bye.